Anyway, dear students, I welcome you to my class and I wish you a very good afternoon. And I thank you very much because all of you, I think, are fasting. So it's really difficult to participate in classes. It does not matter whether it is online class or on-site class, but you have 3 or 4 consecutive classes. So it's really difficult for you, but you have attended my class. This is really a matter of great pleasure for me. Just a minute. Okay. So today I like to discuss the present condition of translation in Bangladesh. And in your coming final exam, you may have questions on this particular area, that is the present condition of translation in Bangladesh. And by this time, I like to share one very important piece of information with you. You know that our university has published a call for translation. I think you have got it, a notice from our department, a call for translation. Do you know it? I think you should know it,
Yes, sir.
because I hope that all of you should submit translations for that book. We will publish a book from our department. So it is really a prestigious matter for you. If you find your work printed there, it would be a new addition to your profile. So I do request you to submit your writings to our that very translation issue, which will be published hopefully in June. In June. So you will get 1 month at hand for submitting paper. The last date of submission is 31st April. So I do request you to submit your translations. You may translate short story, you may translate interview, you may translate poetry, or you may also translate essays. It may be from Bengali to English or English to Bengali, both bilingual volume. But I do ask you not to go for machine translation or Google translation. You have to translate manually. Just exercise your brain and translate the text. You may select the text, or you may take help from your teacher. You may take help from me while selecting the text, or you may take help from your Shami Mondal sir, then Shorab, Ashikur Rahman Shorab. Then you may also take help from our dean sir or head of the department. Professor Dr. Mohammad Shahidullah sir. So you can take help from all these people and from any other faculty member. You can take help, okay, for selecting your text. But no text should be politically biased, or no text should have anything or any ingredient that can tell upon our religious belief or religious solemnity. So I think you know it very well. For example, you have studied Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. So you may translate this poem. Or suppose you have studied short stories from Rabindranath Tagore. So you can select a short story and translate it into English. Okay. Or you may collect some interviews of some great literary personalities from Google or from different other websites and translate those interviews into Bangla. Or if you find Bangla interview, you can translate it into English. So these are the materials that you can select for translation. So I think you have got my message. And I hope Miti, then Maliha, then Maisha Maliha, then Mehreen, Tyreen Sultana, then Samantha, Salsabil Samantha, or Mr. Sail, Mr. Raihan. I find the boys are few in number. The boys are minority in our department. So far, I find here on the screen, most of the names are female names. Only a few are boys' names. So boys are minority in our department. So I do ask my boys also, not only girls, but also boys. For example, Khalid Saifullah, then Mr. Saqib Mahmood, then our Sheikh, Bangladeshi Sheikh Sajidul Islam, Sahil, so Ayon. So I do ask you to translate an important piece of writing. Just select an important piece of writing and start translating by yourself, not by machine. Machine translation is not acceptable. Okay. So anyway, now let's come to our discussion. What is the conditions of translation in our country? Let's search for some materials in Google. Let's search for some materials, whether it is available or not. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Translations in Bangladesh. Just mark. In Bangladesh, many people translate, but unfortunately, if you search for informations about translations in Bangladesh, you will not find much materials. So it shows the poverty of translation in our country. Okay, in our country, translation is done by many people, but it is not institutionalized, or it does not get sufficient patronization from government or different other institutions. Now let me see African literature. African literature in Bengali language or translation, okay, in Bengali language. Okay. We find some materials here. But I think, and you have also marked that most of the writings are mine. For example, reading African literature in Bengali. Google shows this matter. And this is my writing. ICLA. Oh, it was published in, it was published from Georgia, the University of Tbilisi. They published it. So you will find these materials here. I have translated African literature into Bangla. Lots of writings, lots of books. Then what is it? Okay, it's a journal, literary journal, Creative Flight. In this very Creative Flight, you will find my translation here. Dialogic reading of African literature in Bengali. African literature is mostly written in English language. And in our country, only 8% people can read English comprehensively. And what about 92% people? For 92% people, we have to translate African literature into Bengali. And I am doing this job, and you will find some materials here. I have published an essay, an article, research article, and this research article is published here in this journal, Creative Flight. Okay. All right. View reading African literature in Bengali. What do we find here? Let me see. Oh, again, you will find my name. Reading African literature in Bengali. All right. Then dialogic reading of African literature in Bengali. South Asian and African literature, South Asian and African literature. Bangla summary. African episodes in Russia, Russian and Bengali literary scenes. Africa in Bengali imagination, from Calcutta to, I think these books may help you. This is a book, and you can collect this book. It's a book, Africa in Bengali imagination, from Calcutta to Kampala, 1928 to 1973. And this book was published from Routledge. Okay. So this is Rokumari.com. What does it advertise? Let me see. Oh, it advertises my book. This is my book. You will find my book here. Africa Sahitya Nandan Bhavna. It's my book. You will find it here. So I think in our country, we are translating, but unfortunately, it is not institutionally supported. So now I like to ask you, okay, stop sharing. All right. We have already got some ideas about the conditions of translation in our country. So now I like to listen to you. At first, Tanzina Akhtar. Do you listen to me? Am I audible to you? Tanzina Akhtar.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you please tell me, what are the challenges that our translators face in Bangladesh? What are the challenges? Suppose you are going to translate a book, you have a plan to publish it for your readers. So what limitations or what challenges do you usually face? Can you share your ideas? Just from your observation, you can share your ideas.
Sorry, sir.
No, you need not say sorry. You have to say something because you are now mature. You can be a teacher now in a high school. So why do you say sorry? No, okay, Tanzina, don't worry. Take preparation for future. Now let me talk to Shushoma Chak. Shushoma, am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think you have your own literature. You are Chakma, so Chakma language is very rich language, I believe. You have your mythologies, you have your folk tales or folklore, you have your literature in Chakma language. So do you think that translating a Chakma text into Bengali is easy or difficult? Or what problems will you face, you think, while translating a Chakma language text into Bengali language? Just share your own ideas. Chakma language has its own literature. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you have your stories. In Chakma language, you have stories. You have folk tales like Thakurmar Jhuri. You have also myths in Chakma language. Myths about monsters, spirits, ghosts, gods, goddesses. So do you think that it is necessary to translate Chakma literature into Bengali literature, into Bengali language? Just at first, give me this answer. Do you think that it is necessary or essential to translate your literature into Bengali?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you feel that your literature should be translated into Bengali. Good, very good. I also feel so because I am interested to read your literature. Now, is there any translator of Chakma language in our country? Is there any translator of Chakma language in our country? Do you know any person who translates text, Chakma text into Bengali?
No, sir.
Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay, there is nobody translates your literature into Bengali.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a plan to translate your texts into Bengali?
No, sir.
That is, you have no interest in translating your text into Bengali?
No, sir.
But don't you think that translation is necessary? Because translation means knowing each other. You will know Bengali literature, and Bengali readers will know your literature. In this way, both the parties will be enriched, both the parties will be benefited. So translation is essential. But in our country, we do not find translations of many texts of many languages. We have Chakma language, we have Tipra language, we have also Santali language, we have different other languages of ethnic people. So these languages have got their own texts. They have their own stories, own narratives in their own language. So I think their texts are to be translated into Bengali. And I believe as they go to schools, colleges, universities, they can read Bangla. So they know Bangla.
Yes, sir.
Now it is their responsibility to translate their text into Bangla. Then there will be cultural exchange. You are also Bangladeshi. I am Bangladeshi. A Hindu is Bangladeshi. A Muslim is Bangladeshi. A Buddhist is Bangladeshi. This country is for everybody. This country is for the Chakma. This country is for the Shantal. This country is for the Tipra and some other ethnic people. So we have to know each other for fraternity. We have to know each other for brotherhood, for solidarity. If we know each other, then we can develop sympathy for each other or harmony in our relationship. We want to live in peace. We do not like clash. We do not like violence. We want peace. We celebrate harmony. So anyway, so from this discussion, some horrible things are coming out. For example, we have Chakma literature, but we do not know it. It is really a frustrating aspect of our literature, a frustrating side of our literature. Anyway, in Bangladesh, I like to share some challenges of a translator. As I am a translator, I like to share some challenges. And at first, let me share some of my experiences so that you can understand that translation is essential. In 2022, while I was going to a foreign country, I was waiting in an airport, and my aeroplane was 4 hours late. 4 hours late. So I had to wait at that very airport for a long time. At that time, I started reading a book. I collected that very book from the airport bookstore, and I started reading it. That very book was written by a Zimbabwean writer, a young lady. The name of that lady is Noviolet Bulawayo. The name of the book is Glory. It was written in 2022 in the month of March, and it was shortlisted for Booker Prize. So I started reading the book, and I was astonished to find that that very book was called An African Animal Farm. It was a satire, and it was written on the dictatorial regime of Robert Mugabe, the Zimbabwean dictatorial or fascist ruler. He became the prime minister of Zimbabwe in 1980. Till 1987, he was the prime minister. And from 1987 to 2017, he was the president of Zimbabwe. And he enjoyed autocracy. Now, this book is written about different dark sides of the rule of Robert Mugabe. And I was astonished at the bravery of that very author. So how bravely she writes about a dictator. And suddenly a thought crossed my mind at that time. I thought that this kind of book is not written in Bengali literature. In Bangladesh, especially if you think of our literature from 1971, you can call our Bangla literature a bourgeois literature. Bourgeois literature. Bourgeois literature means middle-class literature. And this literature is always on the side of the power structure. It's always on the side of the government. This literature is always glorifying the government. That kind of book, that is Glory, written by No Violet Bulawayo, this kind of book is not written in our country. And why this kind of book is not written in our country, I think you know it very well. Because we, the writers of this country, are highly politicized. We want benefit, we want favor from the government. So we do not have accountability to our readers. We feel that we have accountability to the power structure, to the government. So in our writing, we do not criticize the government. Then I felt in that very airport while I was sitting and reading that very book for hours, I felt that I had to translate that book. And I had to bring it to the knowledge, to the knowability of our readers, of our writers also. So you may question why. The answer is, I want that kind of book should be written in our country, in our literature, in our language also. So this is the purpose of translation. Translation always works in a vacuum. Understand? Suppose you are translating the Iliad, written by Homer, composed by Homer. So why should we translate Iliad? Because we don't have Iliad in Bangla language. We want to know Greek literature in Bangla. And that very literature may develop a kind of consciousness among our readers, among our writers. You may feel that, oh, this kind of book should be written in our literature also. So that is the purpose of translation. Translation works in the vacuum and invites the writers, the readers to fill up the vacuum. I like to share another experience. In 2014, that is 2014, I talked to my friend. He's also a university teacher. And I decided to organize a day-long seminar on subaltern literature. And we decided a time frame that is from 1971 till date. Unfortunately, we find only a few writers in Bengali literature who write about the subaltern or the marginalized people in the society. Only a few, 1, 2, 3, or 4, not more than 4 or 5 prominent writers writing about these working class of people living in the margin of the society. So that very impoverished picture of our literature, especially in the time frame of 1971 till date, during this very time frame, so made me very much thoughtful about the causes behind this scarcity of subaltern literature. So why does this happen? It happens because our literature is mostly bourgeois literature. And the bourgeois writes about themselves, not about the working class of people or the proletariat. Now I feel that I have to translate some texts, some writings from African literature and from other literatures, which usually deal with subaltern people. And that very literature may bring about a kind of intertextuality with our literature. And our writers, our readers may have a consciousness. They can develop a consciousness about this very particular aspect of our literature. So from these two examples that I share with you, from these two examples, one thing is clear. So what is that very thing? If you question, where does a translator work? The answer is the translator works in the vacuum. It is the duty of a translator to fill in the vacuum among the target readers or target literature. And these impoverished pictures of our literature inspired me to be a translator. Okay. Now I like to give you another example. I'd like to give you another example that I have gathered from my experience. While I was doing my PhD, I collected some writings on foreign literature. Okay. I collected some essays on foreign literature. 3 essays, and those 3 essays were written in 1968. 1968, just think, many, many years ago, 1968. So I started reading those essays. And I found that though the writers proposed to write about that very foreign literature, unfortunately, they could not write about that literature. They started writing about some other things, hypothetical things. I find the scarcity of informations. I find the scarcity of knowledge. Elaborate now. So why does this happen? It happens because at that time, those writers did not find books of that foreign literature. So I felt that it's my responsibility to write, to translate some books of that literature into our language so that our writers may be enriched, may improve themselves. So I have shared these three experiences from my personal life to let you know that the translator's duty is to discover the vacuum of the society. And in that very vacuum, he should be active. He should work to fulfill or fill up this very vacuum. So the job of translation is not an easy job. It is not a casual job. I think it's a highly formal job. Now, another important incident that has also inspired me to become a translator of foreign literature, especially African literature. I have also translated some stories from Latin American literature, Egyptian literature, and English literature also, even Indian literature, Bhutanese literature, Sri Lankan literature. I have translated some texts from these literatures. Now, you may question me why? Why should I translate the texts of other literature into our language? Actually, you must not forget that most of the readers of our country suffer from historical myopia. Historical myopia, that is, they are very, very short-sighted in terms of historicity. If you ask a person about history, then he starts his discussion from 1971, at best 1947. He does not have the confidence to claim that Ramayana, Mahabharata are his inheritance. He cannot go back to Panchatantra. He cannot go back to Puranic age. So our readers and some of our writers suffer from this historical myopia. They are confined to a particular time frame, which is very small, a very small segment of time frame. They are confined. And this very confinement tells upon their creation. Now, how can we overcome this confinement? We can overcome this confinement by translation. If we translate the texts of ancient period or ancient communities, and if you translate these texts and bring these texts to the present readers, then they will develop a kind of connection with antiquity. They will develop a connection or connectivity with antiquity. So I think this is another reason for which we have to translate the texts of world literature. You may question me, what about our texts? Yes, we have to translate our texts also and bring them in contact with the international readership. Actually, we are living in an age of interdisciplinarity. We are living in an age of multiculturalism. We are living in an age of hybridity. So we have to know each other. Knowing each other is power. If you know many people, you will have many ideas, many informations. You will have a very huge quantity of knowledge. But if you do not know many people, you will not have any opportunity to gain much knowledge. So if you want to know the other people, or if you want to enrich yourself, you have to know the other people's art and literature. But we do not know their language. But we can read them. We can read their literature in our language. And that is made possible by a translator. Okay. So I think you have got some ideas about the tasks of a translator, or in what particular space does a translator work. Now I like to mention some limitations of translation. Translation sometimes offer fragmented picture of a whole body of literature. Suppose you translate the classics of our literature, only the classics, or you translate the ancient texts of a literature, but you do not translate the modern texts or the recent texts. It means that you are offering a fragmented picture of translation. And you will find this kind of poverty or this kind of gross limitation in our country. Many people are fond of translating classics only. They do not translate the recent writers. So why? Because classics are popular among the people. The readers know the names of the writers. And you know that our publication industry is too much commercialized. If you translate a text of an unfamiliar writer, the publisher will not agree to publish it. But if you translate a best-selling book, it will be published by the publisher. Why? Because it will make more money for him. So your translation is also controlled to some extent by the publishers. They control, they give you directions or prescriptions, what text you will translate and what text you will not translate. So to respond or to listen to them, if you listen to these publishers and translate some classics only, those translations may give fragmented knowledge to the readers. Now, how do you know it? Suppose in my class, I asked, in one of my classes of Green University, I asked my students, do you know anything about African literature? Then only a few of my students answered, yes, sir, we know African literature is political literature. I was astonished. Yes, African literature of the first generation is mostly political. But at present, Africans are writing about Boko Haram. They are writing about old home. They are writing about romance. They are writing about relationship between a student and teacher. So they are accommodating diverse subject matters. So as you have read the translations of classics only, you are now branding that literature that, oh, it is political literature. So translation has got a fatal limitation. And what is that limitation? This limitation is that it can brand a literature and confine our literature into a particular title. That is actually bad for any literature. So while translating, I think the translator should take this task as a project. He will have to translate in such a way that his translations would offer a considerably complete picture of that very literature. In Bangladesh, there are many translators. I like to mention some names. Dr. Fakhrul Alam of Dhaka University. At present, he's a teacher of East West University. He's my teacher. and he is a very prominent translator. He usually translates from Bengali to English. Then you will find the name of Khalikuজ্জামান Ilyas. He was a professor of Jahangirnagar University, and then he was a professor of North South University. Now he is retired. He is a man of 74, 75. This very person, that is Khalikuজ্জামান Ilyas, is also a very, very prominent translator in our country. Then another translator, Abdus Selim, he is a professor of a university. I can't remember the name of that university. It is in Tikatuli, most probably. So this very man, Abdus Selim, is a very good translator. He translates from both English to Bengali and Bengali to English. And you will find one of his translations in our volume, about which I have already shared some information with you at the beginning of my class. And then Alam Khurshid is a very good translator, a big translator. He has translated a lot, Alam Khurshid. And he usually translates from English to Bengali. And I think you know your Shamim Mondal sir very well. He's also a very, very prominent translator. And recently he has translated Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks, a very famous book. And he has translated it into Bengali. He has also translated some texts, very prominent texts. For example, The Guide by Arkenaya. And he has also translated Discourse on Colonialism by Amy Césaire. So he's a very good translator, and he has translated a novel by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Weep Not Child. So anyway, you have translator in your university, in your departments, and I do ask you to talk to them. You will get lots of ideas from them. Very lived experiences they can share with you. So these are the translators. Even Bangla Academy every year gives award to a translator in our country. In this way, this very organization is trying to patronize the translators in our country. But I think we have a lot of job to do. So what should we do? We have to translate more and more. We have to translate our texts into foreign language and foreign texts into our language. That may enrich each other. But while translating, we have to think of the fatal limitations of translation. We should not marginalize our literature through translation. We have to translate in such a way so that the readers may get complete picture of the literature to which that very literary text belongs. So anyway, these are some of the tips that you can consider seriously while translating our text. So I do ask you to keep all these points in mind so that while translating your piece of writing, you can apply these tips and improve your or develop your translation. So from my today's discussion, I think some important points have come out. You have learned, for example, why should we translate? Number one. And where does a translator work? Number two. And number three, how does translation politicize literature? And number four, what is the responsibility of a translator? So these are the points of our today's discussion, and I think I have to end now. Now, if you have any question, please, you may talk to me. And I will give you attendance now. I'll have to give you attendance. So any question from anybody?